Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome to Spiritual G-Spot. I'm your host, Gina Hatz is Too Much Woman, and I am so absolutely excited to be having this conversation with a dear friend of mine. This is Roy, and Roy is a grief counselor and a phenomenal writer coming up with his first book. We are waiting with bated breath, and he is here to be in conversation with me about all things grief. Hello, Roy. How you doing, baby?
Hi, Gina. It's great to be in the spot.
In the G spot.
I am.
You know, I'm never surprised at how people respond to that, and I love it. I love it. Thank you for being here. We've talked about doing this for a while now, and I'm thrilled that we're actually having this conversation. And I'm really excited because I know that whenever you and I talk, it just finds its own path and blazes its own crazy trail. And I know that you're a plethora of brilliance and experience and knowledge. And so looking forward to tapping into all things grief. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit more about who you are and how you show up in the world?
Well, first of all, that was very nice. Thank you. It makes me feel nice what you said. I'm the bereavement coordinator with the Nova Scotia Health Authority, one of them, in palliative care in the Central Zone here in Halifax. So I live in Dartmouth. This is my home in Dartmouth. I'm under sequestration like we all are right now. And so I work in the hospital. I do grief and bereavement work there, one-on-one counseling, family, group, memorial services, and a lot of education, stuff like that. As well, I have a pretty active consulting career, working mostly with organizations that have experienced a trauma or a loss or a death. So anything from suicide to workplace accidents, homicides, and usually coming in to work with organizations that are trying to mount some sort of a response, a loving, caring response. So that's an area of expertise. And I'm also co-director of a grief camp for kids and teens in the Annapolis Valley, and I write. So those are some of the things that make me tick. I also like to walk, and I'm a brother and a son, things like that.
And an awesome friend of mine.
A good friend.
And a phenomenal cook.
Evidently.
Let's throw that in there, because
Indeed,
I just had the opportunity to spend some time with you and taste your amazing cooking, among so many other things.
Yes.
I can't speak highly enough about you. Gosh, I'm trying to decide where to start, because I want to gush for a little bit, because I think what's so exciting, and I'm actually going to use the word exciting, about having this conversation around grief with you, is that I know that because of the work that you do, that you can really hold the container for this whole idea of grief in all its many facets. And so when we hear the word grief, when I hear the word grief, I kind of go, oh, this is some heavy shit. But grief,
right.
and maybe it is, but grief really has so much, I don't want to be too Pollyannish, but fuck it, that's my nature, possibility to it. And is such a, dare I say, beautiful, important part of our spiritual journey. So I want to start in a place with defining what is grief, so that we can go in a couple of different directions. What's grief?
Yeah, well, the easiest definition of grief is our response, the human response to change and loss. I mean, that's the boom, quick one. And then bereavement would be the specific, be death. Yeah.
Okay. So I like that first definition, because here we are in this very unique space and time. And many of us are thus far, directly untouched by COVID-19. And I'll speak on behalf of me and the community that I speak to. I don't know a lot of people who have directly been affected by death of a loved one or have died themselves yet. I'm hoping not. However, there are so many pieces of fragments of grief that this topic keeps coming up for me in conversations. So it's not only the grieving of this scary time, but grieving of past worlds, grieving of past ways of doing business, grieving of past former selves, grieving so many things. And so I want to start really broadly with your definition of grief. And I want to talk a little bit about why we're so resistant to, if we are, I'm thinking intuitively I am, resistant to the grieving process. What about it scares us so much?
That's a great question. And it's really, I think there's so many levels of it, because there's so many different kinds of grief that it's a very broad question with perhaps a encyclopedic kind of answer. But I think, broadly speaking, grief tends to come with hurt, with hurtful feelings, and with hurtful feelings comes sense of vulnerability, and with sense of vulnerability comes sometimes feelings of weakness or feelings of not being in control. And I think in our society, which tends to lift up, organized together, got it together, and doesn't really make any space for the via negativa, for pain and for suffering and for darkness, then grief actually comes to represent a failure or a symptomology, or it leads to symptomologies. So that's why these days people don't talk about being sad. They talk about, if they're in grief, they come to my office and they go, I'm depressed. I'm like, wait a minute. Like, depression is a flat affect. Do you have a flat affect, or are you just sad? So,
okay, that just triggered something in me. So let's tease that apart for a moment. What is the difference?
Between what? Between what?
Yeah. So how do you, like, between being depressed and grieving? Like, how, that's right. Holy shit, never thought about that.
Well, grief should elicit not just sadness, but it unearths and exposes like a whole it unearths a whole retinue, an archaeology of pain within us, and emotions: sadness, fear, anger, joy, reminiscence, hopelessness, hope, bitterness, loss. So there's all kinds of things that float to the surface when we open to grief. So grief is an animator. Grief is the portal into life. And it's, I think it's, I got a book with me here that I brought by Francis Weller. And I'm going to see if I can find this really cool quote. I'm probably not going to be able to right now, but basically he says that the grief and aliveness cohabitate, and it's when we're in grief that we actually we're in this strange dance with life, with our most aliveness, because grief speaks directly to what was alive, what was there, what we just had that was so beautiful and now is gone. So there's this weird dance. So with depression, therefore, grief, when it's normal, when it's natural, or when it's unrestricted, should lead us to have powerful feelings of sadness, fear, and perhaps anger, and then eventually like love and tenderness and warmth and praise and gratitude for the person. But if we're afraid of hurt, coming back to what we said just a moment ago, if we're afraid of hurt, if we're avoidant of feelings, if we're experientially avoidant, which means if we push back bad feelings like they're bad or weak or vulnerable, what happens is what we end up doing is pushing down those feelings, flattening them out, and that's what depression is.
Man, this is so hitting home. Yeah. It's so hitting home. I love when I think about something in a brand new freaking way that I've never thought of it before, because I'm relating it to my experience of my family dynamic changing recently. Right. And I was depressed for so long, feeling almost numb, like resistant to the feeling, resistant to the pain of it. And then the grieving process, and I've talked to you a few times over the past year or two about the grieving process is more animated. It is more going there. I'm trying to find the words, as opposed to resisting. It's leaning into as opposed to resisting.
Well, that's what we want to do. But I want to also be realistic. There is a phase in grief when we actually do sort of collapse in, we withdraw, we numb out in the shock of it. So there is a very natural and normal period of denial and flattening, but it doesn't last very long.
That brings up a really good point. I had messaged you the other day because I was in conversation with a coaching client, and what had come up was the 5 steps of grief. And I don't, we hear about this languaging around denial and then acceptance, and then I can't even remember what they all are. And I was like, I remember I was coaching and I was like, you know what? This is not my expertise, but I have a friend who knows all about grief. And I said, yo, it was a quick text. I'm like, yo, Roy, what are the 5 steps of grief? And I had a question. And you're like, actually, so talk to us about the actually, because I think that that'll be really helpful. And that's going to lead to my next question.
Well, the 5 steps of grief were developed by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and some of her colleagues. They were originally developed not for people who are grieving, but rather for the dying. And in her research with the dying, she saw that people started with denial.
When they themselves were dying.
When they were dying, yes. The original research was for people who were dying, and they came up with denial, anger, bargaining, acceptance, and some sort of other moving on kind of thing. And so they took that very good model for dying, and they sort of transferred it over into bereavement and grief. And they called it the stages of grief. And since that time, people have it caught on in the zeitgeist. And what ended up happening is people started believing that grief had stages, when in fact, grief doesn't have stages. It's a churning around in a waterfall, at the base of a waterfall, with all these feelings coming and going. So in fact, I don't ever bring the 5 stages of grief up when I'm working with people counseling. It doesn't even come into the room. The feelings might come into the room. Maybe someone is bargaining, or maybe they're in denial at different times, but no such thing as a stage, and it's an unhelpful, and not everyone experiences every stage. So
I think that's so helpful. And I'm so glad you debunked that myth for me, because it kind of frees up a little bit of the energy around what I should be doing, or this very at least it debunks the myth that there's this very linear intention that I should be, it makes it fucking wrong. Whatever I'm feeling, it makes it wrong because I want to move in that direction. So let's
nothing human is linear.
Yeah. And you can quote that. Hashtag.
Right.
So let's talk about some of the ways that we're grieving. I know your specialty, and one of the areas that you work in particularly is with those who are grieving the loss of loved ones. However, can we start in the space of just talking about some of the things that we maybe are grieving given the pandemic that we're experiencing globally?
Well, right. I mean, you could speak to that as easily as I could. Obviously, there's been a lot in the news lately around grief. About the word has come into this really interesting vogue right now, where people are saying, what's happening right now is grief, and that there's some sort of change, that we've lost our typical habituations, that people are grieving because of job loss, because of a fear of a lost quality of life. So there's all kinds of things that we say that we're grieving, but I'm not 100% sure all of it's grief yet. I kind of feel like right now we're in anxiety more than anything. And like, it doesn't feel necessarily like, it feels like we're in an instability phase. I'm not sure that we've lost it yet, but I definitely know people are anxious and unhappy with what's going on. But sure, there is some grief for sure. But so part of my first question was, is it accurate to say that what we're actually doing is grieving what once was? We're moving into this, I don't know if it's a brave new world, but it's certainly a new world. Is it accurate to say that we will ultimately have to participate in a grieving over the way things were, so that we're not so resistant to the way things are going to be? I mean, here's what I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I'd like to know what you think about that.
Yeah, well, here's what I'm pretty sure about. I know we touched on this before, and we might feel differently about it. I can't imagine now, ever, like I fly a lot. In the past 2 years, I've been on tour a lot. I do a lot of corporate flying. I can't wait for the next moment to step onto a plane. And I don't even particularly like flying. Like I'm not a big fan of flying itself, but I love to travel. I just can't wait to walk into the airport and just experience that again. Like it's like someone hit refresh, and I feel like I'm looking at the world like with dewy eyes, like a deer in the forest, like Bambi. Like I'm like, oh God, everything. I described in a live earlier how I went to the grocery store the other day, Roy, and I looked at, with my mask, and I looked at everyone that I could catch in the eye, and I was like, I was madly in love with everyone. Like I just had so much love for everyone, because for the first time, every single person, no matter what, was connected to me through this experience. And I just felt such a surge of love and compassion. And so
It's beautiful.
I guess the way I feel is, I haven't seen my parents in a while. I haven't seen friends in a while. I'm pretty much a homebody, but I am really going to relish in like sitting in a restaurant. I'll be like, oh my God, we're in a restaurant. Yeah. Like, so, okay. So all of this to say, all of these experiences, which I'm really excited to have, I feel like will be showing up in a new space because of this experience. Maybe we won't all, but I feel, maybe I could be wrong, that I am. And doesn't require me, and not all of these feelings are going to be good. Some of them are going to be scary. I make my living speaking live. I may not be doing that quite in the same way ever again, or for a long time. So is there a requirement on a psychological level for me to release, to let go of, to mourn what was, so that I can fully embrace the reality of what is? That was a long-ended question, but I'm going to throw it to you.
No, I got it. There was a couple of different parts there. So the first thing I'll just respond to is, like, the first thing this sounds like you're discussing is actually delayed gratification, right? Which is a very different thing from a change of the world. Like if we're just going to get back on our planes and go, well, man, it's so good to, I didn't eat dessert. I ate, the mashed potatoes, and now I get dessert. So delayed gratification can feel like, can move a lot of chemicals in us, can move, all those cuddly, warm, good feelings in us. But it's a very different thing from a sense of loss, of something gone that's not coming back, or some sort of a shift where we don't feel like we get what we either are, maybe what we're entitled to, or what we're used to. So that would be my first thought, that just getting back on a plane and feeling great about it, that may feel good the first couple of rides, but I don't think it'll be long before you're just getting on a plane and kind of worrying about the guy sitting next to you, that he's taking the armrest. And so the question for me is, like, what it seems to me that if there's going to be changes in this, some of them will be forced upon us, but the deeper question, it seems to me, is what have we learned that we're willing to forego now, in the name of a healthier planet, or a healthier biosphere, or a healthier self.
Okay.
And just because something is offered, do we need to take it? And then we will really encounter some grief, because that's the encounter with addiction.
So let me retract then. Not retract, but let me take a step
Okay.
back, a little bit of a step back. Hold on. Let me back up a bit. In this present moment, because
Exactly.
Okay, so maybe I got ahead of myself. So before we think about what it's going to be like in the future, let's talk about present moment. So present moment, I moved through, and you witnessed it yesterday, moved through episodes or windows or frames of emotions where, like, holy shit. And so, and I know so many people are experiencing that. In order to navigate this present moment experience with as much kindness, compassion, dare I say grace,
I like that word.
ease. I don't know. I can't land on one, but a mishmash of all of those. Is it a requirement for me to relinquish the story of the way things were? Like, is that part of the, if we are going to call a piece of this grief, let's just,
Sure.
is it a requirement for me to say, okay, I need to like let go of that story so that I can just be in this moment? You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. And I think that would, it's not a requirement, but I think it's an interesting invitation. There's an evocative moment there as opposed to a provocative moment, right? There's an opportunity for something in us to move toward an opportunity, right? But I don't think it's a requirement. In fact, I think we talked about this a little bit, that I think that everything we're going to feel from the media and from news and even from our social structures are going to say, let's get back to quote unquote normal as quickly as possible. Let's just get back chop chop. And so we're not going to be encouraged, I don't think, or required in any way to grieve or to lose anything. In fact, we're going to be encouraged to try and retract and get everything back that we had. So if we want to, to sort of take your thought a little further, if we think about what we've learned, if there is something to be learned, if there's a story now that, as you said, if there's a story, Gina, that's new to us, a story that means maybe I think about myself differently, think about my neighbor differently, the clean skies, the fact that the system can't guarantee me a job, that there's a little bit more inequality and inequity than I'd like, that our food chain is even sort of right. that in fact, if you want to sort of, if that's the new story, then there is grief. And I think it was Stephen Jenkins, the grief author and expert, who said, if our generation is to awaken, we will awaken with a cry of grief. So I think grief is the portal to awareness. It's when we go, that's gone, or we've been giving it away. Like we've just been giving away our inheritance, right? We've been giving away our inheritance. So, but it isn't a requirement. No, I think it's an invitation.
This takes us back.
And with that, I have another drink of my wine, Gina.
Yes. I feel like
here's
we need this more and more. Here. So, okay, this takes us back to the beginning of our conversation when we talked about resistance to grief, right? So it's human nature. I mean, we want to resist everything we do is to avoid pain and to move towards pleasure. So if we believe that to be true, then grief feels like, ugh.
I'm not sure that's true.
Okay.
I'm not sure that's human nature.
Okay.
But it's a way of being, but I'm not sure it's human nature. Go on. I just wanted to throw that in there, throw that wrench in before you got any further.
That's a good distinction. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, Roy.
No. Please continue your question.
So I know, I think, but okay. So we look. Here's the truth. I don't want to grieve.
Nice. I appreciate that. That's an honest.
I don't wanna.
Right.
Do I have to?
Nope.
What are the consequences of me not grieving? Oh, and whether it's a death, a relationship, a job, a old self, I don't know. What's
Francis Weller would say that that grief, when not experienced, compresses down into depression. Squeezes down into that, that a lot of our depression in our culture, we have two pandemics other than, we have anxiety and a depression. Both of those and suicidality, but those mental health epidemics that we're seeing right now haven't been seen at any other time in human history. So on one level, at the deepest level of our species, where we're humans on Mother Earth, and we know that Mother Earth depends on us, and that our interactions with other human beings need to be dignified and beautiful, and that we need to engage with animals and the sky and the rivers, and that we have sucked at that, and that our entire society is built on economy and commerce and economics, and not on love. So we are so far from being able to understand who we are and what we are anymore, that we've sort of lost access to that primal ability to grieve and to know what's good for us. We're not supposed to grieve all the time, but we're supposed to be able to grieve. But human nature, like when you said earlier about not wanting to hurt, in the past, for millennium, for like literally hundreds of thousands of years before the in industrialized society, grief was a natural and expected and loved celebration. We danced, we sang, we had rituals, we did fires, right? And we sent our ancestors into the stars. We did not like avoid it. We didn't go like, oh my God, Grandpa died, I'm crawling into the woods and I'm gonna eat some peyote.
This is so relevant. This is so good. You know why? So my background is Greek and Italian, and even I, as a child, noticed the difference between and I remember going to a lot of funerals. I don't know why, but I guess we have a really big family. And on the Greek and Italian side, if we were to go to a funeral, like people just, it was ugly. Like, you know, throwing themselves on the casket and the snot running and the hair tearing. And it was very loud. And it was part of the ritual was to be loud and make a scene. It was it was how we did
make it happen.
Grief. And we would go home and there was like more of that, and we would dance. The Greeks especially, we would go after the funeral, we'd go back to the house and there would be dancing and shots of ouzo and crying and dancing and laughing, and it would be like a party of a send-off in the crazy, and lots of food. It was it was very different than going to funerals of my or other people, other cultures that were very quiet and proper and contained and seemed very different. And I don't know that, you know, I don't want to say that the way we did it was best, but that almost primal, no frame around, no boundary around the feeling.
Yes, the primalness of it
feels closer. Yeah, it felt.
That's right.
Yeah, and I know that I had a young cousin who passed when I was a child, and I remember driving to Ohio and meeting her mother, and they had offered her medication to subdue the pain or the grief, and I remember her fighting the doctor to not take it, because the belief was to go there, and she wanted to rage. She wanted to be in the pain of the fire of it. So talk to us about how we can, let's do this. Let's make it practical. How can we go there and trust that we can handle it? And maybe that's the bigger question.
Well, I mean,
that's a big question.
It is, but I love what you just described, and I think we still do have remnants, and we have really powerful residue of our ancestral models of grief. So it's really great. Like, they have survived on, but they fight those Greek and Jewish and indigenous grief models that are so life-giving and allow energy to move up inside people and allow them to express their sadness and to shake and to tremble and to cry. That's exactly what we need, and so there is a remnant of that left, but we have to really hang on to it now. We have to fight for it. We're increasingly in a time, Gina, where dying is privatized. People want to die alone, just family only, please. Like, they don't want any community in, they don't want friends even in, or family, just direct family. Many people don't want a celebration, a funeral. Many people don't want any kind of, they're just like, the idea is just snuff me out, put the candle out and go about your business. Go back to Walmart, right? Like, kind of, right? Like, go back to whatever you're doing and don't worry about me. And so there is a way in which the whole culture is streamlining to dismiss death and to make sure that it doesn't interfere with commerce and with our jobs and with our families and cutting the grass. And I'm being slightly flippant here, so I apologize for that. But I think the direction is pretty clear. You know, I don't think you have to look very hard to see what's happening.
Yeah,
So,
I think I know that I've had the conversation with my mother, who says, "I want you to throw the biggest frickin' party. Like all my favorite
amen.
foods." My
Yeah.
grandmother, her mother, we lined her casket with her favorite chocolate bars, and we literally had a party. And so, um,
Right.
and yeah, there's just I'm so curious around that. Like, don't make a big deal about me.
Right.
Let's not make a big deal. But what, we call it a celebration of life. And so,
And some people
and I
even hate
think,
that term.
yeah,
Yeah.
interesting. I even, let's just take it to the most minute detail is, even when my daughter is crying, I want to make better her pain. I want to ease and soothe her discomfort, because it's my discomfort, really. Like, I can't stand to see her suffering. So even in the most basic way, we're uncomfortable with uncomfortable feelings. When I say we, I mean me. And so I'm learning, I have put clear intention around literally holding the space for her to go there and encouraging her to go there.
Yeah.
And so if we look at it in a more macro space, creating spaces where we're allowing ourselves to grieve, because we know it, fill in the blank. We know it, what is
who we are.
healing. It's
yeah. It's who we are. And is as much as we, like we're excited about birth. When a human comes into the world, we have no problem recognizing that this is a great moment. Break out the cigars, pop some champagne. We do it at birthdays, we do it at weddings, we do it at anniversaries. We're really good at celebrating our passages and our movement through life. And then we come to death, and all of a sudden, like, we pull in and we pull down.
Yeah.
So coming back to you and your daughter, to just come into the micro, as you said, like that's mirror neuroning. So the whole point of grief is that it's like a yawn. Like, if one person starts to cry, it'll make you cry. That's why we go to movies and like we're crying and we're like, what's going on? The whole audience is crying. So there's a mirror neuron in us that is a deeply embedded herd tactic that helps us to experience things together. Like, we don't experience things in isolation. The greatest falsification of our industrialized society is that we're individuals, that we do things on our own, that we, that my pain is my pain and your daughter's pain is her pain, as opposed to, we're built to immediately respond to the tears and to the 20,000 facial muscles, to literally respond and move and dance with each other like that. And so grief is a dance that we're invited into.
So how do we do, so you bring up a really good point. So here we are in isolation, and many of us grieving. Right. How can we support one another and ourselves?
It's hard.
For those of us who are grieving when we can't be together.
Yeah, I know. We've had.
So sad.
Well, it's hard. Yeah, it's super hard.
I mean, give us some.
Well, some people are already doing some great virtual stuff. I mean, I'm not. We know that virtual stuff, like we're doing right now, works. There's a power to it. Human beings, it's a tool, and so we're able to do that. We're able to make meaningful gestures out of with our technology, and you can do so right now in virtual reality. Certainly lots of mothers that have lost kids, they have these virtual memorials. They call them angel gardens in places, and they go and they have these virtual spaces where their daughters' images and stuff, and they can go there and they can lay like virtual flowers down, and they can,
oh wow,
right? So and other people can come and lay virtual flowers down too. So that's one thing that we're doing, which has got its pros and cons, but I think it's something right now. I think we can, obviously, with who we're with, remember to feel and to talk and to communicate about our feelings about things, to actually drop a little bit deeper than how are you, what's on, let's Netflix and chill, because we are capable of great swaths of human experience and great deep plunges into self and into feeling. And if we don't invite each other into that, it's not going to happen. So ask a frickin' question. How are you feeling, for one? And then there's dancing, there's singing, there's making art, especially with kids and stuff, but adults too. A lot of music is being made right now. But I'd also say, Gina, that there's also a capacity that we have to hold. Like human beings have a great capacity to hold pain until the right time to share the pain. And anyone who's lost anyone knows that, you know, if your mother or father dies, like you go to the hospital, you freak out, but then you go into duty mode, and you spend the next week putting together the funeral and doing this and doing, and
right.
You hold, and you're not, you know, some people on the floor, but many people are able to hold and move through. And so I think we're just going to hold for a while. I think we're just going to hold and just let this stuff just simmer and hold and float and wait. And when the time is right, then we present it. I mean, this is built into us too. We do this at war, right? Like our boys die overseas and we hear about it, and then the whole community holds and waits and holds and waits until the body comes off the plane, and then it comes in. As soon as it's in the church, boom.
Wow.
Hold. So I think we have the capacity to hold. And I think that once the COVID is over, I think it is really going to be important for those who can to grieve openly and in public and in groups.
Oh my gosh, you've just like lit up a whole new part of my brain's awareness around holding, because I've always told myself that it's so important to go where I'm feeling and to allow that, because I spent so much time resisting my feelings growing up. You know, it was called too emotional, too sensitive. So it was like, okay, take that shit, put it under, take that shit, hold that beach ball under. And so thank you. And
it can go wrong.
And it's been such an unpacking for me to say, oh, this is what I'm feeling right now. Let me just, if I can, park it, honor it, and do something around it. And I talk a lot about the ritual that the process that I use. And I love that there's also a way that we can honor ourselves by holding that pain or grief or mourning or whatever we want to call it, for a time when we can be held or when we can be honored in the right way. Or I love that, because it kind of makes it so not so black and white, and that feels really good to me. So thank you for thank you for that. I'm going to chew on that.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah, no, we are good at that, but you are right that we can get stuck in that if we don't break out of it. Like if we hold and we become really avoidant and afraid of the feelings beneath the holding. Then we can get trapped in our sadness, and we can get stuck, and then our grief becomes complicated. And most of the work that I do is with people that are stuck like that, who can't let go.
I just had a little light bulb. So you know what oh my gosh, you know what I connected the dot. What I've done since the pandemic, and I did it before sporadically, and now I'm doing it consistently, is I'm actually doing that. Now that I think about it, I've talked about this before, where every day around 7 o'clock, I take a bath, and I create a ritual. I light candles, I play music, and I go into the bath, and I allow myself to feel whatever wants to be felt that day. And nice. I started doing that every day over the course of the pandemic, because it's like throughout the day, I just felt like I was all over the place, like ping ponging, and I just never felt like I could handle it. And so this kind of gave me a place to hold. It's almost like throughout the day, it's like, let me just collect all of these little uncomfortable feelings, knowing that at this time it will be expressed. So it almost calmed me to say, okay, I know you can't deal with this right now because you're about to be on an interview with, or you're about to do this coaching call, or you're about to serve dinner, or you're about to, but I do know that every day, it's like Pavlov and the dog, the salivating, I know, because I've created a ritual, that it will, and some days nothing happens, and some days I like cry like a banshee, and sometimes I rage, and sometimes I fall asleep, but I know that I'm holding, oh my gosh, you just put a new frame for me. I'm holding the feelings until they have they can properly be honored. And
we're safe too. And when we feel safe to do it too, that's why lots of people cry in their cars. Like a lot of my grievers, right? Like, ching,
Yeah.
Right? They're just like, just burbling and
Yes.
crying all the way to work. And then they like clear up, put on their
Oh
makeup,
my
go into
God.
work all day, get back in the car, boom, cry in that little safe space between work and home again, and then back in with the kids and back on. So like we have
My
this incredible
life.
capacity to give ours yeah, and it's wonderful if you can actually say, this is my time
Yeah.
to feel. And I like to be as like really as intentional about that. I'll, like you say, like now I value you, what you're feeling is important. Like as you slip under into the water, like just to say,
Yeah.
this is your time.
Yeah.
This is your
Yeah.
time now.
Yeah. And I know for myself, what I used to do was I had a chair. I'd show it to you, but I didn't make my bed today. It's right over there. I have a chair that used to be my chair that was designated for that. It was like, I'm going to sit, when I
Right.
sit in this chair, it's like my body knows this is the chair where that can happen.
Yeah.
Um,
Nice.
so that I was able to contain, and for some reason that felt really safe for me,
Totally.
because then I could leave it and I can go to it. And I also use music to help me, because I trained myself for so long not to cry, not to
Right.
even rage, because it was not proper or
Right.
acceptable. And so sometimes I still have a hard time going there, because I think I'm scared I'm going to get lost in that thing. So thank you for that frame. That was so helpful. Like, not only can we, but it might be appropriate to hold it.
It's, yeah, hold it, and then
That was so
release
cool.
it, and then also like have time alone and also time with. I think we can do
Yeah.
both those things, right? Like there's a time for holding
So
alone,
good.
and there's a time for being with others, and both of those experiences are really important for us.
That was so helpful. I adore you. I think we could probably do another couple hours. I just feel like whenever we have conversation, it's so rich. And I just kind of after want to go and just like marinate in like all the insights and the feelings. And so thank you for your time. If people want to connect with you, to reach you, to tap into your work so that we can be ready for your book, or learn from you. I know you have some awesome videos on Facebook that are so helpful for people who are grieving. So tell us how we can find you, Roy.
Thank you. A couple of different places. So Roy Ellis Grief on Facebook, easy to find there. I have lots of videos there. And then you can also find me at royfellis.com. That's my
Roy
website.
F.
Roy F as in Franklin. Roy
Okay.
Franklin.
F.
Roosevelt Franklin. That's Sesame
And that's a
Street
new
for.
website with like new cool stuff on it. So
It's so fresh that it's probably full of bugs, like literally like little critters. And yeah, those are the two places that I'm probably easiest to. And I do have a YouTube channel, but you'll link to that through some of the Facebook stuff.
yeah, I will. You're amazing. Thank you for doing
You
the work
too,
that you do,
Gina.
because it takes someone very, 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 very special with very special capacity to do the work that you do. That's so important. Thank you for navigating this journey with us and with me, and
Yeah.
appreciate you.
Great to be with you today, and thank you for the opportunity. I love talking to you too, and your work is really great, and you're a very special woman, and you have a lot to offer people. So thanks so much for bringing me into your world today.
Yeah, we'll do it again for sure. We'll do
Okay,
it
I hope
again.
so.
Thank you,
Take
Roy.
care.
And thanks
Bye-bye.
everybody for
Thanks,
watching.
everybody.
Go check out Roy. Go check him out.
Bye-bye.